Hey everybody, it's Scott for Plant-Based Performance and Extreme Performance Training Systems here in Atlanta, Georgia. I just want to start another video series for our upcoming book that we're doing for plant-based performance titled Know Your Own Strength. So with this book, just like the first one, we've got a whole bunch of co-contributors to the book who are going to be sharing and drawing on their experience in their respective plant-based fields, either as athletes or activists or as a dietitian. So just like the first book, we're going to donate 100% of the revenues of book sales. This time we've chosen two organizations. One is going to be the Animal Legal Defense Fund, and the other is the Atlanta-based Forgotten Animals Rescue. So we're going to take 100% of book sales revenue. We're going to split it up 50-50 to go to each of those organizations for the life of the book. So I'm pretty excited to say that the book, all the contributors have sent in their articles and the chapters for the book. It's being edited right now, so we're on track for probably about an early to mid-November release of the book. So just keep checking the website and social media for that, and it should be out real soon. So I'm really excited today to be sitting here with one of our co-contributors of the book. I've been a big fan of this guy for a long time. I've heard him on a couple different podcasts that I follow. Finally got to meet up with him in Austin, Texas at our big Plant Build event. This is dietitian Matt Ruscigno. Matt?
What's up, man? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here in your gym.
Awesome.
Fun to hang out.
Cool, man. So why don't you go ahead and tell listeners just a little bit about yourself, maybe about your background and kind of how you got to where you are?
Sure.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I'm a registered dietitian, and what happened is when I was 17 years old, I decided to go vegan, ethical vegan for the animals, and I thought nutrition would be something handy to study. Sure enough, studied 4 years in undergrad, then went to graduate school and became a registered dietitian. So I got 7 years of nutrition studies under my belt.
Awesome, awesome. So you've, I guess being both a registered dietitian and a vegan, you know, I always talk to a lot of people as I'm coming up in strength sports and stuff like that, and you say the term vegan and everybody starts to get a little paranoid, you know, oh, you're not gonna have enough protein to lift weights and be strong, this, that, and the other, and they always want to point back to, where's the science? You know, and they always like to coin studies by dietitians saying you need protein from animal-based sources and stuff like that. So I guess you're in kind of a unique position being both a registered dietitian, which is the highest legitimate level of nutrition practice, and a vegan as well. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the impact that science has had on the plant-based and the vegan movement?
Sure, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because I always say that I've got my foot in these different worlds, you know, but I am a scientist, I have a science background, and I have a very high standard for what I'll say and what I'll look at. And what most people don't understand is that there's a lot of science out there. And there's a lot of research. I mean, magnesium has its own journal. There's a peer-reviewed journal called Magnesium, only about the nutrient magnesium.
Really? Wow.
Right? There's so much research out there. You know, and people say, oh, there's one research study on soy, there's one other research study on soy. There are hundreds of thousands of research studies on soy. It's an incredible amount. And so it's really easy to just look and point to these single studies, but what's really important is understanding this big picture and seeing which direction it's moving in. And that takes quite an understanding of all that is happening with it. And we're really fortunate with plant-based and vegetarian and even vegan to have quite a bit of research. I mean, we've been looking at this stuff for 30, 40 years.
What would you say, like, and you know, barring any topic of like conspiracy theory and stuff like that, but what would you say is probably like maybe I guess the way to put it would be, you know, the biggest hurdle for, you know, the plant-based movement as far as gaining legitimacy on things like you can be healthy fond. I mean, because, you know, I guess too many people when you say vegan diet, they associate it with the junk food vegan diet. Yeah. You're eating a bunch of processed soy, you're eating, you know, a bunch of junk, you're not eating, you know, whole food products.
Right.
But what do you think, I mean, because you can be like that on an omnivorous diet. Right. You know, you can eat a junk food omnivorous diet as well. So what do you think are some of the biggest, you know, hurdles or kind of misconceptions? I mean, you just talked about soy and research papers on soy and stuff like that, and you always hear, avoid soy because if you're a man, you're going to grow boobs or, you know, whatever.
Right.
I mean, what are some of the misconceptions that you could dispel pretty easily here?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, people always say, oh, it must be so hard to be a vegan and a dietitian. The nutrition field must be like so critical of you. That's really not the case because we have all this evidence and people know that eating more plants is better for us. because we have decades of research. And I find that it's more troublesome, or at least problematic and argumentative, in the fitness world.
Yeah.
And it's funny when people who are eating shakes and bars are telling me, who is eating all these whole foods that are very nutrient dense, that I'm missing nutrients.
Right.
And I'm not eating healthy. And it's like, I'm eating all this stuff that's like well established is healthy. You know, it's not controversial to eat whole grains, vegetables, leafy greens, fruits, nuts, seeds, beans, all these things. Like, the evidence is very clear these foods are good for us.
Yeah.
You know, so what was your question?
Well, no, I mean, it's kind of funny that you mentioned, like, you know, you say, well, fruits are good, you know, because, I mean, somebody I read, I think it was online or something like that, somebody even said, hey, have you ever heard a doctor say, you need to eat more meat and drink more milk to be healthy? No, what do they always say? They always say, eat more fruits and vegetables. So even somebody who's not maybe pushing a totally plant-based or vegan diet, they know that the typical, maybe American diet is lacking in those essential nutrients that are found in plant-based foods. You know, the phytonutrients, the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes that you're not going to get in your more macronutrient dense foods like your meats and, you know, things like that, and starches and stuff, I guess. But, you know, even, you know, you said, you know, fruits are good for us. I've even had people, you know, say, oh no, fruit is sugar, it's bad for your teeth, it's, you know, it's going to give you diabetes if you eat too much. I mean,
response will make you fat. Yeah, all of this stuff, which, you know, like the whole paleo. You know, I try to see both sides of everything, and what I respect is their rebellion. You know, they're saying, no, the medical community, nutrition community, they don't know, they don't get it, they've been brainwashed, and hey, man, I respect that rebellion. And I agree with them, like, let's get the refined carbohydrates out of there, let's get the junk food out of there. People are eating too much of it, absolutely. Eat more whole foods, absolutely. But then to restrict whole grains and beans, like, I don't see it.
Right.
Whereas the research on that, I think it's on them to prove that we shouldn't be eating these things.
Right, and the legumes and things like that.
Yeah, and they can talk about, phytates and, you know, non-nutrients that interfere with absorption. And sure, there's some evidence for that. You know, phytates do exist. They do interfere with absorption of vitamins and minerals. But the people who are eating them aren't getting nutrition deficiencies.
Right.
So what happens at the end? Sure, this fact is true, but what happens when people are eating those things? Well, we find that it doesn't really matter that much.
Right. So let's talk about soy for a minute, because soy is a big issue, because, you know, I guess, you know, my biggest obstacle as I was transitioning to a plant-based diet was I was looking at foods as proteins, carbohydrates, fats.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, like, when you look at, you know, whole food, you know, plant-based diet, you see that it all kind of contains a little bit of everything. You're going to get some protein in some vegetables. There's even protein in fruit. Right. Maybe not like bodybuilder levels of protein, but you get essential amino acids, you get proteins, you get essential fats, you get carbohydrates, fiber, sugar. You know, all this stuff is contained in these foods, and obviously some foods have a little bit more than the other. So I hadn't really embraced that concept, so I was still looking at, okay, if I'm not eating steak or if I'm not eating chicken or fish anymore, what is going to be the protein portion of my plate? So you're looking at tempeh, you're looking at tofu. Is soy really as bad as they say, or is it what type of soy we eat? I mean, is it?
It's. I'm surprised how controversial it is. I really thought this would pass. I think that the criticisms of soy, that hey, maybe it's not as great as people think it is, you know, and you know, we shouldn't put it in potato chips, you know, and add it to all this stuff. Hey, I agree with that, you know. Let's like take it down a notch. But to say that it's unhealthy and we shouldn't eat it, there really isn't evidence for that. You know, people have been eating it for thousands of years, and they say, oh, but the soy they're eating is different. They're not eating processed soy. You know, like, and then they call tofu processed and soy milk processed, which I think is BS. It starts with the whole soybean.
Right.
You know, what you're eating is very close to that.
Right.
You know, it's a much different product than, say, isolated soy protein, you know?
So what would be an example of process? Would you be talking more like a veggie dog, like a soy dog or a soy burger?
That's stuff that has soy protein isolate, which, you know, I don't think that it is detrimental. It's like, should that make a big part of your diet? No, absolutely. But for most people, it doesn't. Even junk food vegans, it's not making up the bulk of their diet. Right. You know, and I think it's just scaremongering.
Yeah, so you think there's just like a little overly paranoia. If I eat this one thing, I'm going to die. Or, oh my God, if I eat this gluten, it's going to, you know. Right.
You know, we should have, our diets should focus on variety. So don't just eat soy, eat all these other things.
So what would you say to somebody who, and I think, you know, one of the points of these books is I'm really trying to get across, you know, I want somebody, okay, maybe somebody, you know, like you who's been vegan for a long time, or you get it, you know, you're going to pick up the book and read it and say, oh, this is cool, or yeah, I know this, or something like that. But for somebody maybe who's on the fence, you know, they're going to pick up this book and see that we've got some pretty awesome athletes in there who are doing amazing things,
Right.
lifting weights and bodybuilding and, you know, cycling and endurance and MMA and stuff like that. And they're competing at a high level. They're pushing their body at a high level, and they're doing awesome.
Yeah.
They're thriving. They're not just making it. So we know that it's capable. But for somebody who's on the fence, that pick up the book, you know, they might get inspired, and you've got some fantastic, you know, information about, you know, nutrients and things like that in your contribution to the book. But in like 2 or 3 minutes, how could you convince somebody, and what step would you tell them to take that, hey, you don't have to be afraid of it. Guys, you're not going to grow man boobs by, you know, following a vegan diet. I mean, what would you say to somebody who's on the fence, just to give them that little motivation, that push to get over that hump?
You know, a lot of us don't know a lot about nutrition. We really don't. Us being the general population.
Right.
And we tend to make decisions based on the first way that we learn about something. So if you meet a power lifter or a bodybuilder or someone at the gym that just does whey protein shakes all day and eats only chicken breasts and brown rice and 2 little things of broccoli for dinner, and they're cut and they're doing it and they look good, that is your association with it.
Right.
And then if you hear about veganism from some protests with some scrawny folks, that is your association, and it's really hard for people to get past that. You know, our brains want us to just keep doing what we're doing, go with that one thing we learned. And we really have to step back, you know, and look at it in different ways and say that, okay, so you know one vegan and you don't like the way that they eat. There are 10, 20, 100 different other ways to eat that way, you know? And so the first thing we look at is like, can you get all the nutrients you need? Yes, you can, very clearly, right? You're eating the most nutrient-dense foods, right? Fruits, vegetables, you know, grains, legumes. You're going to get all the nutrients you need easily. You know, we've known this for like 30 years. You know, we've been looking at vegetarians and the status of their nutrients and deficiencies and whatnot. And then, you know, secondly, it's not scientific, but like seeing people doing it is helpful. Yeah. Because you know it's possible.
Yeah.
And I meet vegan athletes and I don't eat anything like them. And so I do it my own way. And so when I work with clients who this is new to them, I say, no, don't just go with whatever cookbook your friend uses, find one that fits with you and make it your own. And that sounds obvious, but it's harder to practice.
Now, I mean, so when you look at, like, you know, I know a lot of people who, they follow more of a whole food plant-based diet where they try to get all their nutrients from solid foods. Well, like the work I did with Stickman, you know, that was his thing. I want to eat whole food plant-based, no powders, no supplements, nothing. And I know people who do very, very well.
Right.
I also know people, particularly my bodybuilding friends, who they love the protein powders. You know, they do the protein shakes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that somebody who's training heavy and breaking down muscle tissue probably has slightly higher protein requirements than the average person, right? I mean, that's been established. Probably not to the degree that a lot of people think, but they do need a little bit more. Is, in your opinion, and I mean, they're making it work, so we're not going to say it's right or wrong, but in your opinion, is that necessary? If I want to build bigger muscles, if I want to get stronger, should I focus on adding supplemental protein, or do you really feel that if I'm eating a wide variety of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, that I'm getting my protein requirements?
You know, for strength athletes, omnivorous, vegan, whichever, you do have to focus on the protein foods more. And you can do that with the whole foods, but you really have to put some work in to not just eat rice and beans, but maybe to make like, you know, make your own veggie burgers out of lentils, which are very high in protein, something like 25% by calories, you know, making those burgers, you know, making those lentil balls and eating more of those, you know, so they make up a larger portion of your dinner, because powerlifters and strength athletes aren't eating as many calories, but yet they have to have a higher crude number of protein. Sure. So you do need to focus on that. Absolutely, but you can do it, you know, with quinoa and with nuts and with these other, you know, foods. And then, you know, what's most important as far as health consequences is what you do most often. You know, and if you're eating a plant-based diet and you're eating whole foods, but occasionally you eat a veggie burger, you know, you get that extra protein, that extra 18 grams, hey, eat a veggie burger. Make it easy, you know?
Yeah, sure. Or as our good friend Jason and I like to say, if you want that vegan Belgian chocolate cake, have the vegan Belgian chocolate cake, right?
Right.
You know? So nothing wrong with that occasionally, right?
Yeah.
I see that too. I mean, I get it. It's one thing if you're a competitive bodybuilder, a physique athlete, where you need to be at like 4% body fat. Yeah, you can't really taking those junk food calories. But every now and then, you don't see anything wrong with like slacking off the diet a little bit, having something you enjoy. I mean,
you know, it's nutrition research. I just came from a nutrition conference, right? And you sit through these sessions and you realize that there's a lot we don't know. And we can only give recommendations based on what we know up to this point.
Right.
And what matters is not what you don't eat, but what you do eat. And there are two big studies right now. One is EPIC Oxford, where it's in England, and these are studies where they recruit people and then follow them and see what happens to them. And there they went for vegetarians purposefully to have a bias in their study toward vegetarians so that they could see what happens to them. And then the other one is Adventist Health Study 2, which has nearly 100,000 people in the US, right? And they're following their diet and seeing what happens, who gets what diseases, what does it look like, how much protein do they have, how much carbohydrate do they have, you know, and it's a convenient way to study people and compare them. And you can also isolate it so that you can isolate things like if they drink, if they smoke, whatever, how much exercise they get, and really just look at diet. And what matters most is what they are eating. And that is, that's tough for some people to recognize because we focus on these little itty bitty things. And if you have cake twice a week, that doesn't really impact your diet as much as what are you eating for breakfast 7 days a week.
Right.
You know, and these studies have shown this, right? And there are people who, you know, I wear a couple hats here. I'm a health professional, I'm an ethical vegan. But as a health professional, you know, you can eat some meat and be healthy as long as you're also eating a lot of plant foods. Right? Because the plant foods are beneficial.
Well, and you hear that a lot, like, you know, you always hear, like, getting on the topic of meat consumption, you know, I think it's safe to say that in this country, people that do eat meat are generally eating too much.
Yeah.
You know, when you compare, like, I know you always hear, like, well, in Europe, meat's treated like a side dish. They might have a 3 to 4 ounce serving, whereas a lot of people in the U.S. are going to sit down to a 12, sometimes even a 22 ounce steak in one sitting.
Right.
And that's just way too much. You know, the other person's not eating that maybe in 2 or 3 days, and we're eating it in one meal over here.
Right. And I don't, you know, just like I'm saying, oh, fake meats can be part of a healthy diet, I don't villainize animal products. You know, the evidence really isn't there.
Right.
You know, dairy products don't pull, you know, the animal protein doesn't pull calcium from our bones. That's not true. Vegans still say it all the time. There's just no evidence for it. It was a theory 10 years ago, but it's not true.
Well, I think, didn't even Dr. Campbell come out and say recently that, I think I was watching a documentary where they were talking to him about, you know, his work with the China study.
Yeah.
And I just remember him making a bold comment where he said, look, I never said meat causes cancer. What I said was that we found that when cancer cells were present, animal protein accelerated the growth, particularly casein protein. So I think people take something that in his background was in the meat and dairy. His family owned a meat and dairy farm. But, you know, he was saying, look, you know, this stuff got twisted around. You know, we just saw that when the cells were present and this was introduced, we experienced a higher rate of growth. And I know that it wasn't human studies, it was animal studies, or no, the China study was...
He did both. Yeah. And that's just like one slice of all the research that's been happening.
Right.
You know, definitely. And I don't think the evidence is strong enough to really villainize this. But like you said, it's like, how much of it are we eating? And if you are eating a lot of, you know, refined carbohydrates and junk food and, you know, dairy and meat, then you are displacing healthier food, right? Because if you only have a certain number of calories per day, you might as well fill that up with as much healthy food as possible.
Sure.
And the evidence is strong that those are plants.
Right.
You know, there's so much we don't know about antioxidants and phytochemicals. You know, we've learned recently, a big study came out that antioxidant supplements aren't beneficial. They do not increase longevity. You know why? It's because you have to eat it in the actual plant. You have to eat the actual, you know, blueberry or whatever it is.
So when they're isolating something out of that berry to put into the supplement, you're not getting the rest of it, which might work synergistically with the whole food. That doesn't work with
and absolutely it works synergistically.
Yeah.
You know, magnesium, you know, they know foods higher in magnesium play some sort of role with the antioxidants that make their actions more profound in our body. And like, why? We don't know. You know, we don't know. Maybe some biochemistry PhD right now in a lab is getting some idea, but I don't know.
Sure.
But I know that is happening. And for me, that's enough evidence to recommend eating more of these plant foods.
Sure. So let's shift gears real quick here, and let's talk a little bit more, you know, because you said, you know, I don't villainize animal foods as far as like the way they impact the health of a diet. And I know that a lot of people who are quote unquote vegan are typically, it's more of a lifestyle thing. It's because they don't, believe in animal cruelty. They've got more ethical basis for the diet, whereas if they were just wanting to eat a plant-based diet, I guess that person would be a vegetarian because maybe they'll still wear leather, or they might do other things that impact the animal, the way that they're exploited. So I know veganism tends to be a little bit more synonymous with activism. So talk a little bit about the importance of, or at least maybe from your viewpoint, of a vegan diet, a vegan lifestyle, and its effects on the environment, on animal welfare, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said earlier, as a health professional, I say, eat more plant foods, but as in activist, I say, don't eat animal products, for the sake of the animals and the environment. And, I'd always loved animals as a kid, and I tried to be vegetarian a few times, and it was difficult in my Italian-American household. And then I found out about vegans and how serious they were about this, and I said, wow, I want to do this, and I've never looked back. And for me, it is part of social justice, like, why kill a living creature if we don't have to? Right? We don't have to, so let's not do it. If I had to, would I? Sure. Would I defend myself from an animal? I would. And I'm not, it's an idealistic position, but it's also a very rational position to say, like, let's not do this. And when we talk about the scale of, like, billions of animals that suffer greatly. And I think that, I've been vegan, 17 years, and in the last 5 years, we've really seen a shift with concern about how animals are kept, and all these things that have been very obvious to me are becoming obvious to more people. That cows need to be impregnated to produce milk.
It's horrifying.
We are impregnating an animal so that we can drink her milk. And, like, that's a really interesting thing. And we don't step back from it because we don't think much about our food. And also just the impact, lots of, like, local folks and foodie folks are worried about our impact on our environment, and they're against factory farming and whatnot, but it's just the amount of grain that it takes and space it takes to raise animal products.
And the other resources too, the fuel, the land space and things. I mean, there's other things to consider. I mean, if you look hard enough on the internet, you can find, to get 1 pound of beef on your plate, it uses this much fuel and this much water and this much grain. And when you look at, things like world hunger and how many people are starving, that grain that's feeding our 140 billion farmed animals could probably end world hunger, so I mean, there are certainly aspects environmentally, animal welfare that come into play, for people that choose the vegan lifestyle. And I think, maybe you could talk about this too, because I'm fairly new to the whole plant-based lifestyle. I went vegetarian myself about 4 years, a little over 4 years ago. I've been vegan for almost the last 2 years of it. And the shift that you go through, the learning, you're always learning, you're always getting better, you're always doing better. And I think what disturbs me the most is when you see people who are just coming in, whereas people have been vegan for 10, 20 years, or maybe their whole life, they get sometimes you see this almost elitist attitude where they kind of look down, and I want to see more of, like, an embracing attitude, like, step back and, like we talked about this earlier, step back and meet that person where they're at. Because chances are you were there at one point in time on your journey, and see that, hey, they're waking up to it now. They're starting to grasp these concepts. Let's help them. Do you see some, like, especially like on the internet and stuff like that, do you see, like, this kind of hardcore vegan kind of elitist subculture?
It can exist, and I'm always, I'm happy to see people excited and feeling strongly about something and being passionate.
Absolutely,
and, like, saving someone or something, but it can turn to some elitism, I think. And I come from sort of an intersectional social justice background, and it's really easy to say to a lot of vegans who this is their first experience with any sort of activism or social justice, not all vegans, but some, that saying, hey, you're going to be so militant about this and so self-righteous about this, I could call you out on probably half a dozen things that you're doing when we start to talk about racism and sexism and all sorts of other issues of inequality that exist, So it's like, calm down, we don't have it all figured out, And like with cycling, you see this as well, and it's like, okay, welcome to activism, congratulations, but you're not the first person to experience it, and there are other issues,
Absolutely, and I think it was on a Rich Roll Pie, he might have been interviewing John Joseph, where Rich had made the comment, like, they were talking about something similar, and Rich had made a great comment like, hey, if you pay your taxes, guess what? You're supporting factory farming. You know, we could find something. You know, everybody's contributing in some way.
Right.
Meet people where they're at. Step back and try to minimize and try to learn more to get better, to every day, you know, do better every month, do better every year, do better.
Right.
And so it's just nice to see, because I mean, all the people I'm exposed to are fantastic. You know, some have been vegan for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, some for life, some like me are, you know, just came into it within the last few years. But I don't see any of that. You know, in fact, they welcome people with open arms. They say, hey, great, more people are finding out about it. We're trying to spread the message. We're trying to lead by a positive example, showing what you can do. You know, following a plant-based diet, you can be athletic, you can be healthy and stuff like that. So it's awesome to see that that's kind of the bulk of what's out there.
Yeah, because there's always other issues, and there's always things that, you know, we support by buying things and by existing, you know, in the U.S. And vegans sometimes, you know, will be outraged over some like minutia. You know, shellac in a sprinkle on accident, and it's like, really, sprinkles? You know what I mean? It's insane. Like there are like Kurds in Syria right now who are like smuggling arms to defend their village. You know what I mean? And shooting at people and risking their lives, and like, really, sprinkles? Like, we're going to debate sprinkles?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, let's really step back and kind of look at the privileges we have to even make these food choices.
Right.
You know, and I do make them, and I get it, and it's fine. I like won't eat something that has animal products in it, but there's a much bigger picture. We're still very new in this. We're still a very small part of the population.
It's a great outlook. So let's, you know, talk a little bit here before we wrap up too. I know you've got a new book out. I know you've been a co-author on Matt Fraser's book. Why don't you go ahead and talk about these projects, kind of your involvement with them, and tell people about your new chocolate book that's out, man, because I'm psyched to see the talk tonight. I'm psyched to see, see the book signing. So tell us a little bit about that.
So the new book is Superfoods for Life, Cacao, and it's on Fairwinds Press, which is the same publisher as No Meat Athlete, which I was fortunate enough to be a co-author of. They said, hey, we loved your work. Do you want to write a book in our superfoods series? And I said, I don't know about superfoods. But then they said cacao, and which is the bean from which chocolate is made, and there's a lot of research.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that, man, because when I saw you at the Austin airport after the Plant-Built Texas thing, I think that was the first serious conversation we had all week, and we were taking off. You know, we had too much fun down there. But you told me that, and I said, is it really, you know, this amazing superfood? And you're like, dude, there's more research on cacao than almost any superfood out there. So there's that much. Yeah,
there really is. You know, a researcher from Harvard went to Panama and worked with the Kuna Indians, where hypertension was almost non-existent, and he's like, what is this? What is going on? And it turns out they're drinking a cacao drink. And when they moved to mainland Panama, you know, they adopt the mainland diet, and all this protection, health protection goes away. And they get type 2 diabetes and hypertension and similar diseases. And it's not only cacao, it's other things, but cacao does play a part. You know, it does have the antioxidants and the phytochemicals in very high amounts, polyphenols, all of these things that are protective for health. And of course, it's not only cacao, it's not only chocolate. It is a bigger picture thing. I still believe in that same philosophy. But for me, this book was an opportunity to do this research, get it out there and show the power of plants, really. And then just to have 75 fun vegan recipes all using cacao and chocolate and cocoa, which were developed by Chef Joshua Plog, which is a very good friend of mine. He did all the recipes, but I get all the credit for the book. But he's the one who did the recipes.
Nice. Yeah. So one tip on how I could incorporate cacao into my diet to start getting the benefits, what would you recommend? Just one simple way that I could start experiencing the benefits of cacao.
You know,
and of course, first go buy his book, and then this is your tip to go along with the book.
Thank you. You know, cacao nibs and smoothies is one, because if you're adding fruit, cacao is very bitter. And the bitterness comes literally from the antioxidants. They are bitter themselves, right? And that's why when you process it to cocoa, you lose bitterness, you lose antioxidants. And so if you eat actual cacao beans or cacao nibs, you're getting that bitterness, but it is bitter. Some people try to pop it, right? And adding it to your smoothie is a real obvious one. But another one that's a little more sort of Latin American is you kind of grind up into not quite a powder, but very small cacao nibs. Mix it with a little bit of cayenne and some sesame seeds, and you can just add it onto some foods, and it adds a
Oh,
really
nice.
interesting sort of earthy, dark flavor to
cool.
it. So that's something you could do.
Awesome. So you want to grind it up to like a really coarse, like
Yeah.
consistency, so not a powder, but
Right.
awesome, awesome. So coarse cacao, cayenne, and sesame seeds.
Yeah, that's a
Sprinkle
good
it
one.
on.
And,
So
I mean,
what would you put it on? Like salads, or would you put
you
it
can
on?
put it on salads. You can add it to like tacos.
Oh, nice.
And that's what's
yeah.
really fun about the book is that most of the recipes are savory.
Cool.
And so there's a pizza, there's like a vegetable tart.
A lasagna?
There's
Really?
lasagna,
Chocolate lasagna?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's wild. I mean, Joshua he's a genius, culinary genius to come up with all of this stuff.
Now, have you tried all 75 of these dishes? Or
Close. Not quite all
Yeah.
of them. Some of my favorites is a borscht recipe.
Okay.
Which, beets, there's a lot of evidence for
Yeah,
athletes with
sure.
the nitric oxide and the oxygen to the cells. There's some similar evidence with cacao. So it's great to mix them. So you mix these benefits and then you mix the earthy flavor as well.
Awesome.
So the borscht recipe is one of my favorites.
Awesome. So there you go. Check out Superfoods for Life cacao. People can buy it at your website. Can they buy it? Is it in stores?
It should be in large bookstores. If not, IndieBound is a website that you punch in your zip code and it tells you what local bookstores are near you, and most of them should have it.
Okay.
I don't have it for sale on my website yet. You can always contact me directly. It's truelovehealth.com, truelovehealth@gmail.com as well if you want to really go through the process of just ordering it from me, or most online book retailers have it as well.
Cool. And I'll be sure to put Matt's website and contact info down in the comments on this, or in the comment section of the video, so they can hit you up if they got any questions. So we've got, it's gonna be too late, but we've got you here in Atlanta tonight for your book signing for Superfoods for Life. You were a co-author on the No Meat Athlete book with Matt Frazier. Tell me a little bit about that. How was that?
Oh, it was great working with Matt. I mean, he has a wonderful website, and we just thought we would add some of the sort of solid, foundation of nutrition science to it.
Awesome.
So we could say, look, this is what the research says. This is how you make your diet. This is what you do. And I went over some of the recipes to make sure that they're, a good amount for athletes and whatnot. And it's more of a guide. People think it's about Matt, but it's a healthy living guide where you don't need to be a serious athlete.
Awesome.
You can get a lot from it.
Cool, man. So yeah, Matt, if you haven't checked out Matt's site, the nomeatathlete.com is a fantastic resource. I mean, that guy his blogs are amazing, his articles are amazing, books are great, so you can definitely get a lot of info there. I know I went there when I first started going vegetarian and looking more at plant-based, some good info. Definitely check out Matt's site, check out the book, and Matt has, like I said, he's going to be one of the co-authors on the new plant-based performance book due out sometime in November. So be sure to check that out. Hit the website plantbasedperformance.org for all that information. We've got the new authors' bios up so you can see who's involved with the book, some great people. So I'm really excited about the project. It's supporting some great animal welfare organizations. And Matt, totally stoked to have you in the gym today, man. It's always good to see you. Is there anything that you'd like to kind of close with? Any tips for people? Or
do you make all your guests match in clothing? Because we both have camo shorts and shirts that say "eat."
I do, man. I mean, we planned this right before we came in. I called him up and said, what are you wearing? And I made sure to dress similar, but I went with the gray shorts, he went with the gray shirt. So we got a little contrast there. But so yeah, man, right on.
No, just thank you to everyone, and it's a lifestyle, and it's a change, and it's changing anything is never easy, and it takes some work, and changing your diet and exercising more is the same way. We hit a lot of barriers, but you always keep learning and always keep moving forward.
Awesome. So eat your fruits and vegetables. Definitely eat your cacao, and we'll see you soon with another installment of these video interviews that we're going to be doing. So look for more awesome co-contributors to the book. Check out the book and be healthy. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, man.
All right.